There are a few more people here, and I'm just going to wait for just one more minute before we start. This is the first time that I've ever used a Zoom webinar platform, and I can safely say that after a year of strange experiences, this is amongst the stranger end of things, because I can see people joining because I have a list, but I can't see people joining. So people feel very present and entirely absent at the same time, which, given why we're here, feels strangely appropriate. This is Zoom's unintended grief platform, perhaps, with people who are with us and not with us at the same time. I just got a message in the chat saying, "We're here, hello," from Jamie. Thanks, Jamie. You are here, you are really there with typing happening. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think we'll make a start. So I'm David Harradine. I'm co-artistic director, along with Samantha Butler of Fevered Sleep. We're an arts organisation based in London that works across the UK. And this evening's event is part of our current project, This Grief Thing, which is a project that invites people to think about and talk about and learn about and reflect on grief. The project takes many forms, from clothing to posters and billboards and shops and market stalls and conversations and various, in the current iteration, various online events, of which this evening's is a bit of a jewel in an already rather fabulous program, which has been put together. So thank you everyone who's here. It feels really special that we're here together this evening. I'm in London, and it's just coming towards the end of a really beautiful day. The light is gradually fading and the temperature is dipping, and something is coming to an end, and it feels like a beautiful time for us to be gathered together. To watch and to listen to two really extraordinary pieces which have been created by two artists, Rayvenn de Clark and Akshay Sharma, who Fevered Sleep commissioned, we think, maybe even back in 2018, or certainly in 2019. It was so long ago that we've forgotten when we actually first spoke with Rayvenn and Akshay about the possibility of them creating their own works in response to the themes of our project, This Grief Thing. Although Fevered Sleep's been in existence for 25 years this month, actually this is the first time that Sam and I have wanted to, or been able to, commission other artists to make work for Fevered Sleep, and we chose a really good couple of artists to start that with. So thank you, Akshay, and thank you, Rayvenn, for being part of this. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Rayvenn and Akshay have translated their pieces into digital formats. Rayvenn's is an audio piece and Akshay's is a film. We'll also be presenting both pieces live in London next Saturday, the 12th of June. So if you want to come along then too, we'd love to see you there. So the first sharing of the evening will be an audio version of Rayvenn de Clark's urgent dialogue, Grief Revisited, Liquid Blackness. This will be followed by Akshay Sharma's moving dance film, Whom Did the Light Touch? The structure of this webinar will be that we'll listen to Rayvenn's piece. Rayvenn and I will have a brief conversation about it. We'll watch Akshay's film. Akshay and I will have a very brief conversation about that, and then we'll open up to a Q&A with all of you who are attending. And we're here till about 9 o'clock, depending on how many questions you ask. So start thinking now. So firstly, Akshay, if you could turn your camera off, I'll say goodbye to you for now, and I'll see you shortly. I'll just stay here with Rayvenn. Thank you, Akshay. Rayvenn de Clark is a UK-based digital sculptor, writer and researcher and curator based in London. Rayvenn's practice explores the nuances of identity. Her work chronicles Black anatomy alongside the handmade aesthetic in the everyday collective experience. The piece that Rayvenn's created through this commission is called Grief Revisited, Liquid Blackness. And I'm just going to read a short statement about this piece before we listen to it. Grief is at the forefront of national and global headlines as we continue to wage war through the coronavirus pandemic. Now, well over a year since the news broke across global headlines, why is it that we still find it so difficult to articulate what grief feels like? As we all move to better understand the modern body politic, we must not, however, neglect the factors that provide the necessary permissions to grieve in a landscape littered with just that, grief and loss in abundance. The dialogue that Rayvenn has with herself explores the often inconsolable and incompressible state of Black womanhood. So we'll listen to Rayvenn's piece now. It's 11 minutes. After that, Rayvenn and I will come back for a little chat. And Rayvenn, if you and I can turn our cameras off and go muted, I'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Throughout the writing of this small-scale paper, I have received a great deal of support and assistance. I would first like to thank Sam and David for their enduring support and continued championing of my practice. I would like to similarly acknowledge Louisa for her guidance throughout each stage of this process in exercising vulnerability and consistency during this challenging time, whose expertise was invaluable in the formulation of this research topic and methodology in particular for this micro-commission. To Asha, you have been instrumental in defining the path of this research document. For this, I am extremely grateful. I would also like to single out all of the many Black and Brown communities around the world and commend you for your enduring strength in the face of great adversity, which, in this present moment, rests at the intersections of Brexit, Black Lives Matter, the COVID-19 pandemic, Reclaim the Streets protest, and the anti-protest bill, which inevitably inspire such musings. Act 3. Soul. My gender weaponized, minimized, gentrified. My embodiment brutalized, vilified, personified. Something of the other about it. Exotic, a living document. Within a society that for someone like me is problematic and disruptive. My mind, body and soul as a colonial subject. An act of negotiation, of brokering. We inhabit and inherit a history Now let us acknowledge it. Talking oneself into existence is discombobulating. And plexus that always seems to slack off, causing a fractal shift. Willful self-interrogation. In co-defining and co-authoring our ongoing narrative as tolerated nuisances, living in this racialized, unsocialized and oftentimes gendered body, an embodied socio-cultural nuance. Indigenous peoples, global citizens, the emerging majority. Western ideology needs a definition for everything, categorizing subtle encounters through the symbolic performance of power and privilege, resulting in ownership and claim. Shame, smallness and insecurity as a biological deficiency, the purest form of disadvantage within a broken system. A poison within my mind. Justice as romanticized, present only through its omission. The invisible and the impossible, tolerated only on the fringes. My abject labour, imbued with hype and promise, has carried me through the decades. As tears exit my swaying body, precision is important. It is the paradox of life, or so to speak. Everything I say revolves between my head and my heart. And if the blinders come off, well then existence is unbearable. The human condition is a straight up tragedy. Act 2. Body. I learned very early on that I would need to be able to bear a huge amount of pain in order to be happy. To have to choose between respect and dignity, when one would assume that they are concomitant. They are not. To see such joyous moments relegated to the realm of artifice, a default position endemic of a much larger issue. I, like many others, become little more than a side note, not even in the margins of history. Do you know how it feels to pretend to not be sad, melancholic, overwhelmed, angry, full of sorrow and fear, politeness and anger? This constant negotiation is about staying alive. Life is sacrosanct. Life is suffering. The future is unpredictable, but the past is chaos hiding behind the face of order. And what is lost forever. Reality is a porno. Life is but a meme. Trying my utmost to not reinforce the often damaging expectation that as a black woman I am not vulnerable. A sight impervious to assaults of the mind and the body. Other the uses of this anger that emanates from deep within my chest, whose tiny vibrations ripple around my ribcage, singeing my lungs, scorching the edges of my heart, leaving me breathless, motionless, and sometimes even thoughtless and reckless. My fear of anger taught me nothing. This I learned from Lord. In times of strife, what and where are my responsibilities? Black womanhood. Black womanhood. As a form of polysemy, it has many implicit and explicit connotations. A distinction without a difference. A mere linguistic coincidence, maybe? An uneasy postmodernist trend of revision. Histories that are written wrong. systemic amnesia, inequitable systems that reflect others and expose dishonest narratives, the strategic collapsing of diasporic identities to a state of pure, undiluted alterity, where the economy with the truth is only relative to what you can earn from a lie. A coincidence, maybe? Maybe not. Reinforcing often damaging expectations, recognizable only to a Western audience so that it does not intimidate with its foreignness. Sometimes my thoughts feel unintelligible, a mishmash of false memories, anxiety, and newspaper clippings that emerge as little more than brain fog. The mutual atrophy of liveliness as defined by our present lockdown conditions. The phantasmagoric made material, which collide with the incompressible state of black and brown femininity. Collective his stories, her stories, their stories. A position that retains a nearly constant volume, but with no fixed shape. Is my subjective consciousness a disadvantage? Consciousness is disparate within the monopoly of black politics, resting wholly within the realm of epistemological pluralism. There is violence to knowing the world isn't what you thought. My objective register has long since fallen away, as private thoughts are made public, and in doing so I must reposition myself. Everything changes. Nothing perishes. This commission was devised during the 2020-2021 COVID pandemic and the heightened Black Lives Matter movement, and as such, I must recognise my own ongoing anxiety, pain, fear, and confusion that has resulted from the recent global events. Please consider this the first entry in a necessary conversation. Grief Revisited, Liquid Blackness, by Rayvenn de Klerk. The negotiation of grief seems to be at the forefront of national and global headlines as we continue to wage war through the coronavirus pandemic. Now well over a year since the news broke in headlines across the world, why is it that we still find it so difficult to articulate that which grief feels like? As we all move to better understand the signifiers of the modern body politic, past, present, and future, we must not neglect the important and often overlooked conditions of justice alongside one's personal quest for a lasting liberation from grief. However, you must also not neglect the present push and pull factors that can in many ways work to provide one with the necessary permissions to grieve in a landscape littered with just that, in abundance. This two-person self-dialogue emerges in a state of remoteness, and therefore in a state of geographic, ideological specificity, seeking to explore through an auto-ethnographic approach the often inconsolable and incompressible state of black womanhood, which retains a nearly constant volume, but with no fixed shape.
Rayvenn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm extremely conscious of who you are in this work and your voice and who it is that's speaking and what you're speaking of. And I'm very aware of who I am in comparison and my presence in this event with you. So I don't want to ask you my questions. I would like to pull out some things that you've said and ask you to maybe say a little bit more the piece is a dialogue with yourself. So I guess maybe this little bit of our couple of minutes of chatting here could also be a dialogue between you and you, facilitated by me. There's something that you say right at the end, which where you say you describe Black womanhood as having a nearly constant volume but no fixed shape. I think I understand the sense of no fixed shape, but I don't know about understanding the nearly constant volume of Black womanhood and in terms of how you experience. Could you say a little more about that?
Yeah, it was a weird, I mean, it is a strange phrasing, so I think I'm still probably working through it in my own head, but it was this idea, it was this kind of idea of commodification. And so there is this idea and there is this concept and there is this aesthetic about womanhood, and that's kind of the consistency within it. But there is also no fixed shape. And so it feels quite disparate to be considered and engage with a community where you say, okay, I'm a Black woman, but then the discursity of it all and the differences and the nuances on it, it just made it feel like it was a very fixed identity, but fluid in its manifestations. And I think that's what I was just thinking about when I was writing it, and just trying to articulate my thoughts. And it came out in that way, and I didn't interrogate it anymore at that moment, and I didn't rewrite it because it's what I felt. But even now, yeah, thinking about that phrasing it is difficult to comprehend, maybe from the outside, but on the everyday, it feels very natural to kind of feel and interact in that way.
And I absolutely wasn't questioning your phrasing. I was just really struck. I mean, that notion of having one sense of self being a constant volume. I guess that just that phrase, when I think of things that are at a constant volume, it feels, I don't know if this is what you were alluding to, but when I think of things having a constant volume, I think of a loud volume, and it feels like it's something quite hard and challenging, maybe a bit of an assault. But I don't know if that was what you were alluding to.
Slightly. I think particularly if I think about it more when we're thinking about music industry, and let's say we think about the new WAP video, the reception or the commentary that goes around, let's say depictions in that way, and the sheer like volume and quantity of perspectives on it. And I think that's kind of really quite encompassing of where I was coming from. There is this aesthetic, there is this image, there is this visualization that, you know, that we are all kind of put alongside and compared alongside, and that being very loud and that being very brash and that being so many different things. But again, there's still this kind of fluidity in it. There's always a slight difference, there's always a slight changeability of it. And I think that's what I was trying to interrogate, this idea that as a Black woman, you are in this very tight niche, in this box, in this aesthetic. But it's particularly in a remote context that feels so kind of not only diluted, but so kind of changeable depending on kind of where you are or how you choose to present yourself. And so I think that's what I was trying to speak to at the time of writing the piece, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. And just another phrase that really struck me actually is a quote, I think, from Audre Lorde, which you weave in. And the quote is, "In times of strife, what and where are my responsibilities?" And frankly, everything you say is striking. And when I listened to the piece earlier, I was pausing a lot, playing and pausing, because I wanted to stop and think and rethink and re-listen. I don't know, what have our responsibilities been? What new responsibilities have we learned about during this pandemic? It feels like there are so many.
I think so. I think if we're thinking about not only pandemic conditions, but kind of all the social commentary that's going on around Black Lives Matter, around I think it's the protests, the anti-policing bill, like there is so much going on. And I think at that time I was thinking, oh my God, I remember just feeling like really angry at like the state of things that were going on, the idea that I couldn't go out and do the things I was normally doing. And then thinking about that we are all in this very particular context. And then wondering what that means in terms of like my own responsibilities. Like, what am I supposed to be doing as myself? What do maybe I feel others are supposed to be doing, and just not really having a clear kind of um a clear conception of that actually within in pandemics in conditions, because it all just became for me this one disparate time. I remember like days were rolling into one, and I was just trying to think about, okay, we are in this very, very strange and like really quite painful moment, and like, where are our responsibilities? What are mine? Maybe are they different from others? And I think that's why I just left that at the end of Act One, just to think about that in contrast to feeling quite angry at the time.
Yeah, wonderful. I would love to talk to you about the structure, the Act 3, Act 2, and then the introduction coming towards the end, but maybe we can come back to that later on. Rayvenn, thank you so much. Thank you so much for producing such an incredible piece of work. I'm going to ask you to swap with Akshay, so if you could turn your camera off and Akshay turn yours on, and Rayvenn, I'll see you in a bit. Thank you. Hi, Akshay.
Hello, David.
Welcome back. I'm just organizing my screen over here. So why have I lost Akshay? Okay. Okay, so the next piece which we're going to watch is a short film created by Akshay Sharma. Akshay is a choreographer, dancer and performer based in London who comes from India. His work as a dance artist is invested in languages that are emotional and dynamic. He believes dance can be an antidote, and is invested in exploring its vital, untamed labor through rigour, attention, and joy. And anyone who knows Akshay knows that he has possibly the most joyful, joy-filled laugh of anybody whom one could ever meet. So I can attest to the rigour and tension and joy in working with Akshay, as well as in Akshay's work. Akshay is currently inspired by the surface of the earth and rocks. And the film that he's created for this commission is called Whom Did the Light Touch? And as with Rayvenn's piece, I'm going to read a very short statement about the film. Akshay was moved by stories people shared where they felt they couldn't express their grief. To him, it felt like grief was ever present, but not visible. And he wanted to work with that sense to highlight this void. The film was made in collaboration with filmmaker Camilla Greenwell and composer Nicole Robson. Akshay's film is a filmed dance solo. It runs for just under 9 minutes. Excuse me. We did some technical run-throughs earlier on, and we weren't happy with the playback quality, playing the film through the Zoom platform itself. So actually what we're going to do in a moment, we'll drop into the chat a link, a direct link to the film on YouTube. It's unlisted there, so you need the link to be able to watch it. And I invite all of you who are present with us actually to follow the link, go to YouTube, watch the film. It's 8.5 minutes long, and then come back in here once you've watched it. If you could please just drop a very quick message to us panelists when you're back, because I won't be able to tell whether you're off still watching or whether you're back, and I don't want to start talking if some people are still watching. I hope that makes sense. So we'll drop a link in the chat now. And Akshay, thank you so much. And we'll all see you after. think everybody is back. Thank you, Akshay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I started at the beginning of this event. I mentioned that the light was fading where I am, and it's changed. And in watching your film, which is so beautiful, and I feel like just my voice is a bit of an interruption, not a bit, it's a big interruption of something incredibly powerful and tender, which you've created. But I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about it. Here as the light fades, I'm so aware of all the different timescales in the film. The timescales and the different elements of time, the cliffs and the sea and the ground up rock in the sand and the slime on the rocks and the grass growing on the beach and you and your body moving and being still and that changing light. Could you say a little about time in the film and or about how you experience time in your body, in your practice as a dancer and choreographer?
Thank you, David. I think the light and that sense of time was really important to the film, and I think sort of thinking about light really way back, like maybe in 2018, 2019, when first started thinking about it. And I think that sort of sense of time, especially the dusk, was really important. But then there's the arc of the day, there's the arc of the tides as well. There's the morning sort of changing into the 24-hour cycle of the day itself. And especially I think there's this element of that time on the beach itself, which is probably it's a bit cyclical in all the places, but at the seaside I guess there's more of a repetition of cycles that happens or at sort of different levels. And I think that was really important, and we sort of captured that on in sort of on that day. And I think just also in that sort of sense of time and sort of scales of the bigness of the body, maybe in relation to this the smallness of the body in relation to the bigness of the cliffs, and that sort of time of the receding of that cliff line breaking into sort of rocks into the sand. And I think there are sort of different timelines of different things which come into sort of play in, I guess, a memory, and there's this sense of time with a sense of memory. That sort of sand has a sense of that rock and then bigger cliff, and sort of finding those memories within the body and attending to this to the place wherever that was, also attending to all of those things was really important. Plus also I think there's the memory of this whole past year was really whether in some sense it's right there or it's not right there, but it's really present, that this memory of this last year. And how that changed the idea of both the space and both the time for all of us, and I think particularly sort of noticing that within the dancing body and its urge to sort of move and sort of find itself in a bigger space, this bigger space at that particular spot at the seaside. So some really big things, but I think in terms of the practice of it, I guess there's the sort of coming to it again and again, coming to the doing of the dancing again and again, is something which is really present in that understanding of time crossing through the body and outside.
Wonderful. Thank you. And well, that's brilliant, because that just that image of time passing through the body, it really connects with another thing that I wanted to ask you about. So the film starts and it ends with this image of you with your back to the camera, looking towards the horizon, looking out over the sea from the edge of the beach. And these two images of you in stillness, firstly in the daytime and at the end, as night falls. These two just kind of bookend everything that happens in between, all the other movements, all the time that passes through you, all the movement that passes through you are held by these two images of your back and stillness. Could I ask, you're a dancer, but how important is stillness in your practice? And is for you, is there a relationship between movement and stillness and grief?
I feel like there's this sort of triangle between like movement, stillness, and dancing. Here I'm sort of thinking of the dancing as something different to moving, because I think I just like to say that I'm dancing rather than I'm moving. Maybe it's a bit more romantic, the romantic notion of dancing. But yeah, and this try, and I think the stillness is really sort of important to sort of in that arriving, in that recalibrating, in that finding. Maybe there's a thinking of like maybe stillness as like as more focal, a point, and moving more of a circle, and that sort of point opens and closes in the duration of the dancing. And I think stillness and finding stillness in the movement and finding movement in the stillness is an ongoing is an ongoing labor of the dancing, I feel, for me. And like there are those moments in the film with the hand on the moss, there's this looking out into the sea as well, but there's this hand on the rock, and other moments in the film which I find were really important to find that the silence in it. And with grief, and I think especially with a lot that has happened over the last year, back home, here also, with people that maybe I don't know, but a lot of people that I know. And I think there's this sense of in that shifting between stillness and moving, or like that shifting between attention, of arriving in the body, and then also sort of going out. And I just feel like there's this very, very something present in the grief, which is sometimes the grief's on the side, sometimes it's at a distance, but it's still present, whether it comes, and sometimes it just comes in front, in face to face. And this sort of spatial sort of seeing this this dance of grief in its spatial presence is really acknowledging. I think stillness, maybe in a way saying sitting with something, sitting with grief, sitting with this, sitting with. So and I think that's really important, not only just for my practice, but also in the film, to hold and capture and highlight those that aspect.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Rayvenn, could you come back and join us, please? And hi, welcome back. Here we are again. We have So hi everyone who's joined us. We've got about 10-15 minutes left for a Q&A. So there's a Q&A function, which I've never used before, but I assume that you can type your questions into it, and I'll be able to pull them out and ask them to Rayvenn or Akshay. So if anybody has a question for either of them about either work, we'd love to see and hear it. And I'm going to ask you both a question just to start us off. And I'm going to ask you both a question through the other person's piece. So I hope this works. Rayvenn, right at the start of your piece, you talk about, I think you talk about the body as a living document. And I think you say, you talk about, to quote you, we inhabit and inherit a history. So Akshay, in a moment, I'd love you to reflect on the idea of the body as a living document that inhabits and inherits a history. And Rayvenn, I've talked with Akshay about time, and also in your piece, you refer to the past as chaos and the future as uncertain. So you're both working with time. I wonder if you, Rayvenn, could talk more about time and Black womanhood, the theme of your piece, or time and anything you want to talk about. And Akshay, if you could reflect on the body as a living document, that would be marvelous. Who'd like to go first?
Okay, I'll go first.
Thanks, Rayvenn.
So reflecting on time. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. It's trying to define or to manifest what I guess the last 12 months has looked like is a mean feat. And as someone who thinks visually, feeling like I was quite impaired, that I couldn't make in the same way the images that I do for how I create my artwork. It's been really, really hard. And so what was really different about your piece, Akshay, was that there is this kind of fluidity and this like naturalness that comes through your body when you're dancing. And it felt to me to be natural in all the ways that my brain couldn't achieve in lockdown. I felt so stifled and so kind of, days bleeding into one and hoping for, this lockdown provision to end or this. And so when I watch your piece, sometimes it brings me like ease in this moment that I feel now, like 12 months later, where like I can think again. I feel like I can start to like future plan and make artwork. And I think that's really beautifully kind of drawn in your piece in a way that I couldn't, I think, achieve in mine. I couldn't think of a way to visualize it. And so I had to do it in a different way. And audio is very, very, very different, not different to my practice, but it is normally visual based. And so there was a real kind of sense of fluidity that I feel when I see your piece, that I'm like, oh, I wish I would have had the ability to do that over the last 12 months. And just thinking like, no, I probably didn't have at that time.
Thank you, Rayvenn. Actually, I could just maybe quite briefly, because I'm aware that other people now have dropped some questions in. Any thoughts on this idea of yourself as a living document?
I'm just gonna maybe give it like a small sort of. I was writing sort of answers to the sort of thinking about the questions. There's this very strong memory of last, like now we're in June and July this year, but it's been 12 months. Very strong memory of last June and July, but that sort of memory has come through a sense of dancing. And because when I dance, like I danced yesterday in the same sort of a room, small space, small room, I remembered how I felt last year in my body, and through that I remembered what other things were going around at that particular point in time, which now I think we are at a very different place, but it reminded me of that particular time, but through the dancing, through the moving. So I guess a lot of that history sort of remains, and that time is remembered for me through the moving. and and I think one of those, this accumulation of gestures which has happened, maybe those little moments of dancing over the last year, they came together, and they still come together in every time dance happens for me. And yeah, and I think that so I'm going to keep it brief, but like that just through that very small sort of example, I think um um and I also feel like we as a bodies are we're always our histories. We that first love that didn't happen when we were 10 years old, or that first fall and we broke that arm at the age of 15 or 16, or even before that, at the age of 5, it sort of all remains and accumulates and sort of shapes the, for me as a dancer, it shapes the dancing that happens. I mean, I could give more examples, but
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really great insight. Thank you. Okay, so we have some questions in the Q&A, which I'll read out. I'm going to start with one from Thomas Goodwin. Thank you, Tom, for this question. So I recently heard culture activist Stephen Jenkinson speak about the relationship between grief and love or joy. And I wondered if Rayvenn or Akshay might have some thoughts on grief in relationship to love or joy.
It's a difficult one. I think it's almost like love and hate. They're so closely aligned, or they feel very similar in quite polar ways, that I think if you're thinking about, if I do think about my time during lockdown, or more generally, I do find that when I do have these intense moments of joy, they are always kind of bookended by this kind of like equal sadness and kind of contemplation. And so I do think they are so similar in their potency. Yes, maybe they do manifest themselves slightly differently, but yeah, if I think about my times during lockdown, or even just more generally, I do find that they often appear at the same time for me, and it almost helps me to remember that moment and also reflect in this at the same time. So it's always quite, there's the similarities in my mind.
Thank you. Akshay, do you have any thoughts on those relationships?
yeah, I think very similar. I think there's a sort of simultaneity of these things, of its present. Like, I think grief's always present for when it's present, and within that, there is, I think, very in I mean, I'm not, don't know, I'm just trying to sort of find my language in this, because I just feel it's difficult. And I think maybe navigation of that grief happens through joy, through laughter, through uh, uh, through its opposite. And I think that presence of the continuum is always there in the navigation of grief. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Thomas. A question for Akshay from Annabelle Sami. How did you come up with the title, Whom Did the Light Touch? And whom did the light touch?
What that I think it was during like the January sort of lockdown. It's got a very specific reason as well. There's Blackheath near where I live, and I would visit Blackheath for my sort of daily walk, and just sort of imagining how the light that sort of falls on me is reflected off me and then touches someone else, and is reflected off them, and it then touches someone else. So maybe in some sense, I mean, I don't know the physics of it, but maybe something that has fallen in someone in, let's say Peru, and it's in its various sort of bouncing offs has come. So I think, and in its sort of reflection, as in its bouncing off, it it touches everything and it's on its way, which is present and absent. And I think that was sort of the idea behind, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to put you both on the spot, and it's really fine if the answer is no. Do you have any thoughts or responses or questions for each other? And to put that in context, Akshay heard Rayvenn's piece for the first time tonight, and Rayvenn saw Akshay's piece for the first time tonight. So it's really, really fine for you to go, no, actually, I don't. I'm putting you on the spot. We hadn't planned for this.
No, I don't have anything.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just want to say that I was taken to a place, and yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah.
No, that's really, really fine. I suddenly became aware that everybody is able to ask you questions apart from you of each other. So I wanted just to give you the opportunity if you wanted to. Akshay, just a question from Catherine Small. Did you perform everything in one day in sequence as time passed?
It was done in one day, and the dancing happened throughout the day but it's so nothing's set, but we danced and we filmed it as the day went along.
Yeah.
So it's all done in one day, I guess, 7-8 hours.
Yeah. And everything was filmed in the same place, on the same location.
Yeah, on the same location.
And where was that? This
was I get confused, but Ramsgate, Margate area.
Okay. Yeah, so in
I think it's called Botany Bay.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay. Great. And actually, another question for Akshay about the music. How did you work with the composer, the cellist, for the piece?
So yeah, I think we were. So I actually met Nicole really long time back. It was there's another bit of a short story. It was I met her in September, or I don't know, maybe in August, and at that time nothing was really happening. So I really wanted to make something happen again. I thought, oh, let's have a dance on Blackheath, but nothing happened because at the end of that there was a lockdown. So we kept on talking, and I think over a period of time we shared lots of ideas over Zoom, but then we also met up, and we've been meeting for another project, but we've been meeting. We met in the studio as well, and so so we were discussing and talking a lot about the music as we were all like Camilla's the director, and we were all sort of talking about the theme, so we were all aware of what's happening. It's a short small team, so everybody was aware of the themes and ideas.
Thank you, and that was from Sam Patel. Thank you, Sam, for that question. I'm going to start to draw us to a close, just as the light continues to fade here. Just a couple of things just really struck me thinking back to and looking back at the notes that I took as I was listening and watching. Rayvenn, there's something that you say in your piece, and I'm quoting here: I learned early on that I would have to be able to bear a huge amount of pain in order to be happy. And I just wanted to return us to that phrase, that sentence, which is incredibly powerful, because of the question that Thomas just asked about grief and love and grief and joy. I think there's a connection there. I'm not asking you to respond to that. I just wanted to to bring that out again, that sentence from your piece. And Akshay, just for me also, and I didn't mention this before, one of the most incredible images in the film is your body, the flesh and blood and heat, and knowing that inside the skeleton of your body, next to those chalk cliffs, because chalk is made from the skeletal structures of microorganisms from millions of years ago. So these ancient bodies which died unfathomably long ago, and your living body in front of them is such an incredible image of time and death and life. And I think in both pieces, in both of your works, there is so much grief, so much sense of the struggle of being alive, so much sense of the fleeting moment that we've got to be alive, and so much hope and so much power from both of you in such different ways. So I just want to say thank you both so much, from me and from Sam, and from Louisa and everyone at Fevered Sleep. And I'm sure I can say a huge thank you on behalf of all the people who have attended this premiere. I feel a bit weepy because I'm really, really, really glad that we approached you 2 years ago or whenever it was and asked you to make something, to be part of this project. I couldn't be happier or more glad or more grateful or more in awe of what you have both made. So thank you. Thank you everybody who came along to listen and to watch. Both pieces will be available on feveredsleep.co.uk, our website, hopefully from next week, but keep watching that space. The link to Akshay's film, you can play it as many times as you like, and frankly we can't stop you sharing it either. It deserves to be watched far and wide, and please do check in on the website and come back and listen again to Rayvenn's piece, because the depth and complexity of it really warrants listening and re-listening and re-listening and listening again. I'm going to bring us to an end. Thank you everybody. Take care, have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, David.